Looking back at the 2018-19 NBA season, it was notable for a lot of reasons. More importantly, two of the game's most iconic players hung up their sneakers and retired: Dwayne Wade and Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk was a revolutionary player for plenty of reasons that a lot of fans watching this video already know. So instead of looking at his career as a whole, I wanted to dive into what I thought was not only the defining moment of Dirk's career, but one of my personal favorite playoff runs from a great player in NBA history. In today's video, we're going to talk about Dirk and the Dallas Mavericks championship run in the 2011 playoffs. So let's set the scene here. Dirk was obviously considered one of the game's top players, but he always came with the stereotypical and ancient label of soft. For the first part of his career, this label followed Dirk around, and that was during a time in the league where most foreign players always came with that reputation, no matter how fair it was to that particular player. There were two moments in Dirk's career that led to that label being practically branded on him. In 2006, the Mavericks had a 2-0 series lead in the NBA Finals before Dwayne Wade, with a little bit of help from the officials, led the Miami Heat to 4 straight wins and a title. Then, the following season, the Mavs won 67 games, had the best record in the NBA by a good margin, and Dirk was the presumptive NBA MVP, deservedly so. However, a bad matchup against the 8th-seeded We Believe Warriors booted the Mavs out of the first round. Dirk was named the MVP almost 2 weeks later. Remember, there wasn't a terrible postseason award show back then, and he had to have the trophy presented to him during the second round of the playoffs, which the Mavericks were not a part of. It was honestly one of the most awkward moments in NBA lore. It seemed like Dirk could never recover from that point, but the Mavs kept hanging around as one of the West's best teams, churning out 50 wins every season after that 2007 first-round upset. However, they could never break through to the conference finals. The 2010 summer is remembered as LeBron's decision, but little did we know at that time another transaction would actually be key in naming the next NBA champion. The Mavs traded for disgruntled center Tyson Chandler, and that trade solidified a roster that was the perfect mix of veterans and a superstar who was still in the late stage of his prime. In the 2010-2011 season, the Mavs won 57 games, got the 3rd seed in the West, and they set out to do something in the playoffs that the franchise and Dirk had never done before. It seemed like the Mavs would be tested right off the bat against the 6th-seeded Portland Trail Blazers. The Blazers were seen as a matchup problem for Dallas, and at the time, it wasn't a crazy thought. The Blazers had young, athletic players, and at the trade deadline, they added Gerald Wallace, which gave them an athletic 3-4 hybrid to play in smaller lineups, which was a similar formula that the We Believe Warriors had to upset the Mavs back in '07. Both teams played a very close regular season series, each winning 2 games on their home floor, but the Blazers had won their 2 regular season games after the Wallace trade, so it's no wonder why a chunk of analysts picked the Blazers to win that series. The Mavs jumped out to a 2-0 series lead and went to Portland, where they lost games 3 and 4. Game 4 was most notable for how wild it was. The Mavs had a 67-44 lead with 36 seconds left in the 3rd quarter, but led by Brandon Roy, who at that point was far removed from his all-star form, mustered up some old magic and scored 18 points in the 4th quarter, including what would be the go-ahead basket in the game. Blowing that game carried over into Game 5, where the Mavs started off slow at home, but a big 3rd quarter helped them pull ahead with a 3-2 series lead heading back to Portland in Game 6. To this point, Dirk, while he had a high volume of points, was not shooting the ball particularly well. He did get to the free throw line a lot, but in terms of shooting from the field, it was lackluster. All of that was practically over in Game 6, as he was duking it out with Gerald Wallace, who actually led the Blazers to another fast start in that 1st quarter. But 13 second quarter points from Dirk lifted the Mavs to a 33-point second quarter, and they never looked back, closing out the series. In Game 6, Dirk was dominant, scoring 33 points, grabbing 11 boards, and dishing out 4 assists, while also going 11 of 17 from the floor and a perfect 11 for 11 from the free throw line. Looking back, that game was the catalyst for what would be an absolutely scorched earth performance from Dirk in the next 2 rounds. Next up were the 2-time defending champions, the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers at that point were looking for a three-peat and their 4th straight finals appearance, but it became apparent early that the Mavs had other plans. Equipped with home court advantage in Game 1, the Lakers came out of the gates blazing at Staples Center, leading by 16 points at one point in the 3rd quarter. In 2011, 16-point leads weren't as easy to erase as it is now with all of the three-point shooting. The Mavericks slowly and methodically came all the way back, led by Dirk, who made the go-ahead free throws to win Game 1 in dramatic fashion. Dirk finished the game with 28 points and 14 rebounds on 11 of 22 shooting. It was a theme that continued all series, and it was certainly no different in Game 2 as Dirk gave anyone and everyone on the Lakers just straight buckets. The Lakers had no idea how to stop Dirk. Pau Gasol was usually the primary guy defending him, but the Lakers tried Lamar Odom, Metta World Peace, the popcorn guy, you name it. Didn't matter. Dirk made tough shot after tough shot. The Lakers went on to lose Game 2, keep in mind, at home in Staples Center, and it all built up to a series sweep, where in Game 4, the Mavs literally ran the Lakers out of the gym to the tune of an NBA record, at the time, 23 pointers in a playoff game. For me, this series was memorable in that a superstar player just took a sledgehammer to the champs, which had a bunch of talented players, Hall of Famers, and one of the greatest coaches ever. For the series, Dirk averaged 25.3 points per game, 9.3 rebounds, and shot an absolutely scorching 57% from the field, 73% from three, and 94% from the free throw line, which adds up to a nice 67.3 true shooting percentage. I honestly think Pau Gasol might still have nightmares about guarding Dirk. With the Lakers out of the way, the Western Conference crown was there to be had, and somehow Dirk once again took his game to another level and rose to the occasion in the next series. Dirk and the Mavs were one series away from returning to the NBA Finals, and standing in their way were the young and upstart Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that had some names you might have heard of: Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Serge Ibaka, all on the same team, and they were looking to establish themselves as not only the future of the Western Conference, but the future of the league. Game 1, Dirk went out to make a statement, continuing his hot shooting from the previous series. He dropped 48 points on a very efficient 12 of 15 shooting and an insane 24 of 24 from the free throw line. The Thunder had no answer for Dirk. Poor Serge Ibaka was just left out there on an island for most of the game and had no idea what to do with him. Dirk followed up that Game 1 performance with 29 points on 10 of 17 shooting in Game 2. But the Mavs lost, and they had to go on the road to OKC, which had and still has one of the best home courts in the NBA. The Mavs won Game 3 despite Dirk actually struggling on offense for once, but the highlight of this series is Game 4. The Thunder played with the desperation of a team that was down 2-1 in a series, and their athleticism and youth overwhelmed the Mavs at times in the game. Kevin Durant made a three-pointer to put the Thunder up 15 with 5 minutes and 4 seconds left in the fourth quarter. The Mavs could have just packed it up, been fine with reclaiming home court, and then fly back to Dallas for Game 5 with a tied series. But Dirk would not let that happen. He was great for most of the game, but the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, he dragged the Mavs back into the game, scoring 10 points over that stretch. That 10-point outburst included some of the greatest shot making I have ever seen from a star player in a playoff setting. Seriously, look at these shots. It's absurd, and poor Nick Collison could not stop him no matter how good the defense was. Then came the game-tying free throws. Down 101-99 with 6 seconds left, Dirk made the first free throw, and then the Thunder tried the old waterboy spills liquid onto the court trick before the second free throw. After about 40 seconds of cleanup and patiently waiting for the ball, and trust me, I actually timed it, Dirk calmly nailed the second free throw to tie the game, and he also let referee Tony Brothers know that old trick didn't faze him. Dirk went on to score 2 more points in overtime, and he had the assist that led to Jason Kidd's go-ahead three-pointer with 40 seconds left. The Mavs once again completed a double-digit comeback and headed back to Dallas with a 3-1 series lead. The Thunder were able to put up a fight in the ensuing game to keep their season alive. They even had a lead with about a minute left in the game. But guess who hit the biggest three-pointer to put the Mavs up for good?
Down, and they'll reset. Nowitzki again for the lead. Bang!
Dirk was once again efficient from the field, scoring 26 points in the closeout game. The Mavs were crowned the Western Conference champions, and they had a chance at redemption against a very familiar franchise. Standing between the Mavericks and the trophy once again was the Miami Heat. the same organization that knocked the Mavericks back down the summit in '06. Both teams hadn't been back to the finals since that 6-game series, and both took very different paths to get back to this rematch. The Heat were in the first year of a decade-setting precedent with their supernova trio team-up of LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. The Mavs had already formed an identity as a team full of veterans on the tail end of their primes or just past their primes, looking to accomplish something that was missing from their respective career resumes. The Heat were heavy preseason favorites to win it all the minute the Big Three was put together, and naturally, very few picked the Mavs to win the series. I was actually one of them, and I have the Facebook receipt to prove it. The series started off with a Game 1 that was closer than a lot of people remember. Both teams shot the ball poorly, but the Mavs actually built a 7-point lead in the third quarter before LeBron made every shot known to man. Eventually, the Heat would pull the victory out in the fourth quarter, and the Mavs had to regroup for what would be a memorable Game 2. Facing the prospect of having to go down 2-0 and Dirk having to play the rest of the series with a torn tendon in his left middle finger, the Mavs had to steal one on the road before going back home for a 3-game homestand, back when the finals was in the 2-3-2 format. Game 2 saw a first half that was controlled by the Mavs pretty much the entire way, building a 9-point lead at one point. But thanks to a bunch of careless turnovers and an outstanding Dwayne Wade performance, the Heat were able to turn it around and build a 10-point lead themselves in the third quarter, before the Mavs managed to mitigate the damage heading into the fourth. That's where the thermonuclear athleticism of the Heat took over during a 13-0 run that was capitalized by a Dwayne Wade three-pointer to put the Heat up 15 with 7 minutes to go in the game. This shot was unforgettable in a lot of ways, as Wade stood there and posed in front of the Mavs bench admiring the shot after it went clean through the net. He then took a leisurely stroll in front of the Mavs bench to the Heat bench as the Mavs called a timeout. That was the beginning of the end for the Heat. Here's where I teach you about the pre-taunt, a term me and my buddies came up with and still use to this day whenever we play Super Smash Bros., preferably Melee. If we taunt prematurely before taking a stock or winning a match, it's a scientific fact that pre-taunters lose 99% of the time. Thus, we came up with the term the pre-taunt. Dwayne Wade pre-taunted for a good 30 seconds in his walk from the Mavs bench to the Heat bench, and it all went downhill from that moment. After 2 quick buckets from Jason Terry immediately cut into the 15-point deficit, the Mavs started to gain that momentum on what was one of the best comebacks in NBA Finals history. The Mavs closed out the game on a 22-5 run, which included a game-tying layup and then 2 more big-time go-ahead shots from the Hall of Famer, who to that point shot the ball poorly. Before the Heat could figure out what the hell happened, both teams were heading back to Dallas tied at 1 game apiece. The Heat rode another great Dwayne Wade game and were able to pull out Game 3, despite 34 points and 11 rebounds from Dirk, who missed the potential game-tying shot at the buzzer. Game 4 was to that point not only the biggest game in Dirk's career, but the biggest game in the history of the Mavericks franchise. Head coach Rick Carlisle made the adjustment to put JJ Barea in the starting lineup, and to start the game, having another ball handler seemed to pay off. Dirk made his first 3 shots to start the game, but what we would find out at some point in the second quarter was that Dirk was playing with a 102-degree fever. After a hot first minute in the first quarter, Dirk went absolutely ice cold throughout the game, missing 9 out of his next 10 shots before entering the fourth quarter. Despite Dirk not being Dirk to this point, the Heat had only a 4-point lead by the end of 3. Dirk decided to flip the switch, unlike another superstar in that game who did whatever the opposite Dirk did, scoring 10 points in the fourth quarter and getting to the free throw line 6 times. He even hit a big layup to extend the Mavericks' lead to 3 with 14 seconds left. And just like that, the series was tied at 2 games apiece. With the help of Jason Terry, Dirk led the Mavs to a Game 5 victory, scoring 29 points on 9 of 18 shooting from the field and 10 of 10 from the free throw line. Just like that, the organization was 1 game away from redemption against the team that originally took those dreams and hopes in the first place. The lead up to Game 6, however, did not come without some histrionics and dramatics. If you thought the pre-taunting from Dwayne Wade was bad in Game 2, well, it gets better. Video surfaced of LeBron and Wade in the hallway pretending to cough, seemingly mocking Dirk and the fact that he had to play through a fever in Game 4. This video was recorded before Game 5, but came to surface before Game 6, meaning that Wade and LeBron mocked Dirk before Game 5 and then proceeded to lose that game. Pre-taunting. Now the Heat had to face a team that showed up to the arena in Game 6 wearing all black clothing, signifying a funeral.
Everybody wears all black. That's our ritual in closeout games. Gotta get it done.
It was clear from the first quarter that the Mavs had their mind set on one thing, and by game's end, they had accomplished what eluded them just 5 years earlier. No one was more elated than Dirk, who once again had a dominant fourth quarter. He could not handle the emotions as the clock was ticking down the final seconds. He can be seen heading to the locker room to have a moment to himself as he gathered his emotions, no doubt reflecting on his career to that point before getting up on stage and grabbing the Finals MVP trophy, completing one of the hottest playoff runs by a great player in NBA history. The NBA Finals wasn't Dirk's best scorcher when you compare the numbers to literally just the series before that, so the averages for the entire playoff run were way down. But still, the overall numbers are just amazing. Dirk averaged 27.7 points per game, 8 rebounds, while posting a true shooting percentage of 60.9%. His true shooting percentage was helped by the fact that he shot an absolutely ridiculous 46% from 3. He also did this while facing a gauntlet in terms of competition. A Portland team that was considered, and rightfully so, a bad matchup, the two-time defending champion Lakers, the up-and-coming Oklahoma City Thunder that we would later find out had 3 future league MVPs on the same team, and of course the Miami Heat in the first year of the Big Three. Dirk was already a Hall of Famer before the ring, but his playoff run cemented his place in history. When you stack up Dirk's numbers from that run versus players who played at least 15 playoff games in a single postseason, he is now up there with some pretty iconic names and heavy hitters, which is fitting because during the 2011 postseason, Dirk certainly played like one.